Welcome to Let's Be Honest About Logistics podcast. I'm Nikki Jones, the CEO of Vidu Group. I'm joined here today by Jon Nicholson. Jon has spent nearly 28 years primarily within parcel and e-commerce distribution. He's held full P&L responsibility for over 5.4 billion and managed teams of around 2,000. He's here today to talk about his journey, what the future holds for him, trends within the industry and the importance of people and partnerships from a carrier and a retail perspective. So welcome to my podcast, Jon.
Thank you, Nikki. Good to be here.
Thank you for joining me. Shall we start with telling the audience a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, of course. So my journey started in the factories of Milton Keynes.
Okay.
Where it was quite useful, actually, that there was lots of industry in Milton Keynes because as somebody who needed to work from quite young, you could always pick up some temporary work.
Yeah.
One of those temporary assignments was with TNT Express.
Okay.
It was actually on the Ingram micro contract, and then that progressed to being a permanent role with TNT Express in the warehouse, sweeping the floors, loading the lorries, unloading the conveyor belts. I spent the next 13 years of my career at TNT Express. It was a brilliant company to work for. I progressed from that warehouse floor into shift supervisor roles and traffic operator and ultimately operations manager. That was kind of my journey within operations. And then was really fortunate to make a move into the commercial world when I took over a special services unit. That was the part of the company that did same day and freight and anything that was off network. So that was a P&L, a small P&L role, but it had a commercial and an operational element. And that then morphed into a full sales leadership role within back in the core TNT Express business.
Very good.
Which was back in the days when you not only had to lead a team, but you also had a new business target and a retention target. So you were
good
doing
old days.
The good old days when you had to do absolutely everything. But it was brilliant. It was a great learning ground. And I left TNT Express actually when it was going to be bought by UPS. So of course it was ultimately bought by FedEx. The UPS deal fell through, but when UPS was looking at buying TNT, actually the opportunities sort of stopped, really, at least temporarily.
From a sort of development perspective?
From a development perspective, but also a job risk perspective.
Right, okay.
So at the time, I was a depot sales manager and the person that is now my wife was also a depot sales manager.
Okay.
And there was a very real risk that we would be competing for the same job, which would be quite an awkward dinner conversation.
For sure.
And she was way better than I was anyway. So
She'd have got it.
She'd have got it. So it was time for me to look for other opportunities. I came out of the industry for a short while. I went to work for a smaller local family company in packaging, actually. It had a similar customer base, but a different context. That ultimately wasn't a long-term role for me, and Citylink came
you
knocking.
missed logistics.
I did miss logistics, but it's amazing, isn't it, when you spend any time in an industry, how much you realise you just know. You've learnt it, you've forgotten more than you realise. And when you come out of that industry for a bit, yes, there's lots of transferable skills, but you don't have that nucleus of information. So Citylink came. There was an exciting opportunity at Citylink, which at the time was in trouble then. It was trying to get sold. So the gig really was get it profitable and help that towards its sale. So I was a regional general manager there for London and the South East. That was for the first year. And the second year I took over the international department of Citylink, which was great. It was really in its infancy, quite a small business. We were having some good success, but then I was one of those that lost my job on Christmas Day.
I remember that. That seems like yesterday, doesn't it?
It does seem like yesterday, and a bit of a shock, I think, for the industry. One of those that was a bit of a wake-up call, both personally, but I think for all of the carriers.
Definitely.
That were
well, no one took any happiness from that. You know, the competitiveness in logistics, and everyone was like, wow, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, it was.
You wouldn't wish that on anybody.
You don't wish it on anybody. And of course, there's always a competitive element to any industry. But there's people
I think in that moment, I don't think there was actually. It was quite interesting. You know what people are like when they ring me and say, Nikki, this has happened, that's happened. Have you heard about this? There was no happiness or, glee that was taken from that moment, for sure.
No, definitely not. And the timing, for anybody when things go wrong at Christmas, it always seems a bit worse, doesn't it, than
definitely.
if it's another time of the year. So that was an interesting step, but fortuitously and thankfully I was already in contact with Royal Mail. I texted Nick Landon, who was the managing director of Parcels at the time and ultimately the chief commercial officer at Royal Mail, and said, turns out I'm available for work. And he said, come in on the 5th of January and we'll get you started.
Fabulous. What did they bring you in to do then initially?
So I was brought in as the head of products for domestic and international. So it was a product management, pseudo development type role. But primarily that was bringing the tracked product to market. So there was already a product there. The team had been working on that, but it was really developing the tracked parcel product for the domestic market.
Okay.
Which was great. And it was a brilliant introduction to Royal Mail. Of course, it's a company that lots of people have got perceptions of, and I would probably say that most people's outside perceptions are not what it's like inside the business. So to start to learn the complexity of the organisation from that product role was a really, really good education, actually, to the organisation. And then I moved into a full sales role again, actually. So I did the product role for a couple of years. The group sales director at the time, a guy called Graham Davis, gave me an opportunity to take over about a third of what the Royal Mail sales team was. It initially started as public sector and major e-commerce customers, which was an odd mix. And we quite quickly adjusted that to be kind of parcels and international sales and so on. And then from there, that kind of grew. So it took over successively bigger parts of the sales organisation within Royal Mail. We then brought Parcel Force into it, so I took over the Parcel Force sales organisation. And ultimately we combined those together.
So at its peak then, what did you have, sort of 400 salespeople?
400 sales. Well, 400 a sales organisation, of course, that included the sales operations and bits and pieces. And there was teams, sort of ancillary teams that supported that through successive restructures kind of came in and out, like contract management, marketing was in for a bit and then out and then back again. Of course, sales operations, which is an incredibly important part of any large, sophisticated sales organisation. So not all frontline salespeople, but the majority were.
Yeah, of course.
And then that grew again. So I was fortunate enough to take over customer experience as well, or customer services as it was, but we called it customer experience. You were glutton for punishment.
Did you not have enough with that?
No, I had about half hour free on a Wednesday, so I thought we'd add a bit more in, fill it. I jest, of course, but the reality was that there's links between those.
There's definitely
groups.
Synergies.
There's definitely synergies, and the ability to try and bring customer experience in line with what our commercial customers were requiring. Of course, customer experience has been quite heavily focused on the consumer, rightly so. We couldn't lose that. But to try and bring more focus on the commercial customers as well, which, as we know, is a growing part, particularly as e-commerce continues to boom and so on and so forth. So the thinking behind that, and then brought in marketing and the digital team as well. Back in. So the thinking behind that is we had a much more synergistic approach to how we went to market for our products, sales, service.
You've got much more alignment, haven't you, in terms of the messages you're wanting to send as well?
Of course you have. Yeah, absolutely. But there's always a trade-off. And again, particularly with a company that's the size of Royal Mail that does have other facets to it, you've got to be mindful of all of those other parts. You can't afford to take your eye off the ball.
Does it run in quite a silo effect then? Is each individual business unit quite standalone, or is there a lot of sort of collaboration?
There's a lot of collaboration. And because of the size of it, of course, you get some silos. It's natural in any organisation. But there was a shared view of how you need to bring those things together. And actually the trade-offs were just made around normal things, resource allocation, budget, focus areas, strategy, and so on. So, yes, silos existed, but the part that I ran really became a bit of a shared service. So sales, if you like, supported all of the lines of business, whether that was international, whether that was letters, public sector, or parcels. Marketing served all of it, including the consumer channel, so did the customer experience. So you had to have pockets of expertise, of course you did, but broadly it was a generalist approach, so we could multi-skill across the organisation.
Okay, and where did that role lead to inevitably then within Royal Mail? What was the next step up from that?
Well, there wasn't a next step for me, ultimately.
Right.
I mean, it would have been probably the CCO of Royal Mail.
Right,
but,
okay.
In July, I decided to leave Royal Mail, and I'm currently on a period of garden leave, and I will be joining InPost as the Chief Commercial Officer there.
You just shared breaking news on
breaking
my
news,
podcast.
Potentially. But I'll be joining InPost as the Chief Commercial Officer there.
That's amazing.
In April in the
I
new
bet that
year.
was a bit bittersweet for you, though, because you've loved your time at Royal Mail, haven't you?
Absolutely. Yeah, Royal Mail was brilliant. It was a real privilege to work there. It's a phenomenal organisation to be part of. Clearly, it's the oldest and the largest in the UK, which brings both complexity and a lot of joy and a lot of opportunity.
Yeah.
But sometimes opportunities come along, Nikki, that suit personal ambition, timing, and that was ultimately the
And
decision.
was there a sort of specific turning point that made you feel you were ready to sort of step away, or was it just the opportunity came and it was a step up and you felt it was the right thing to be doing?
I think a bit of both, really. So Royal Mail is going through a transitionary period, but the sale of Royal Mail to EP Group was happening, which I think is a hugely positive thing for Royal Mail, by the way. So that's not a reason to leave. But what it did mean was a changing tide. I'd been at Royal Mail for 10 and a half years, and the opportunity came along for InPost, which was really exciting and arguably the next logical step in my career as well. And so it wasn't so much a specific turning point. It was all of those things came together. And so I'm really excited about it,
Well, it is, that out-of-home piece is really prevalent now, isn't it, with, whether it's carriers or retailers, it is a talking point at the moment.
It's one of those trends in the industry that has gained real traction and has landed, isn't it? And I think particularly in the UK, home delivery is really successful. We like home delivery in the UK typically as consumers. Particularly some of us that are a little bit older as well, Nikki.
Why are you looking at me like that?
Because there's nowhere else to look. But we're used to it, aren't we? Right. Yeah. So we've grown up on home delivery. And back to the earlier point, of course, there's competitive challenge within competitors, but everybody in the UK is pretty good.
Agreed.
Everybody. You really are fighting on the margins when you're talking about delivery quality.
Have you seen that actually? That it is starting to impact logistics companies more and more then from a margin perspective? Have you noticed a trend in that regard? Because obviously retailers are wanting money off here, there and everywhere. Do you think it's going to come to a point where logistics companies are going to have to say, actually, no, that's not feasible for us anymore?
Yeah, I think it's got to. So it's easy to say when you're inside the industry because you're focused on your own margins. It feels like some of the value has been driven out of delivery.
Yes.
And of course, it's a huge cost for retailers. It's arguably a really, really important component of that whole experience.
Correct.
Retailers will be judged on that final mile, delivery. And we know that. We see that customers switch. But retailers, rightly so, want to protect their margins and try and reduce that cost as much as possible. And particularly as some retailers struggle, particularly as we see continued consolidation in the marketplace. Smaller, medium retailers looking to compete with the huge retailers need that benefit. They could win or lose on the cost of delivery. For large retailers, a penny saved on a parcel is, hundreds of thousands, millions in some cases. So it's not to be ignored, but carriers have to operate to profit. Otherwise, we see more of what we saw with Citylink. Ultimately, it ran out of cash and it wasn't profitable before that. What we've seen with, Fastways in Ireland, I'm not close to the situation, but that's just gone recently.
I saw that on LinkedIn,
and I think some of it's been saved and hopefully so. But it just goes to show that you can't continue to operate with no money, particularly not if you want investment in carrier services, particularly not if you want superior delivery quality, particularly not if you want to rely on great customer services. All of those things have a cost.
Well, they're the value adds, but lots of the logistics companies or e-com distribution companies I'm representing are saying the last 12 to 18 months specifically, it feels like it's a race to the bottom on price. There's not really much more around the solution like it used to be, or the value add. It's like, well, can you knock me X amount off this parcel if you want my volume? I think it's become more prevalent. It's always been there, hasn't it? But I think in something shifted from my perspective in the last 12, 18 months.
I think you're right. There is always that. And of course, buyers will say, we want value, we want the value add, we want all of that. But ultimately, it comes down to brass tacks. Carriers will have to make some challenges, concessions there to bring those costs down. And I think the good thing about that competitive challenge is it forces us all to work a bit smarter, invest in things that do make a difference, try and reduce our costs in a positive way. I think where we've seen that growth in e-commerce as well, though, what we've seen is a lot more low-value items requiring delivery. And that's fine, but it does mean the cost of the thing you're buying doesn't necessarily sustain the cost of the transport. And so I think that that dual effect of competitive challenge, the need to manage those costs, plus just the volume of low-value items that are going through various networks, does mean that it goes really well.
Be an interesting peak, won't it, this year?
I mean, it's lovely to have a peak off in.
I know. When have you ever had time off in peak?
Never. So, but it will be an interesting peak. But I think if I take last peak as an example, there always seems to be some sort of challenge in peak, whether that's strikes, whether that's the network falling over, whether it's resource challenges, whatever it might be. The last peak, I think, broadly speaking, the industry, retail and carriers thought it was pretty smooth.
I was going to say not too bad.
Not too bad, and I think it was pretty smooth. And I think that what that is testament to is the carriers and the retailers genuinely working together. So that real shared understanding of what you can do with spikes in volume. How do we manage that Black Friday, Cyber Week period, which is a phenomenon that we weren't dealing with,
Well, it
10
has
years
to
ago.
be going back to that partnership piece, doesn't it? You're in it together, and however you work that through as a retailer, as a carrier, if you want it to run as smoothly as possible, it's that communication piece.
It is. And the shared part is the consumer. You or I buying something. Understandably, we will buy for a discount in Black Friday or because we've just left it too late to Christmas, whatever it might be. But the retailers, I think, have a duty to manage the customer expectations. And I think they've been braver in doing that over the last few years because they realise the risk is too high. Extend those delivery promises. Make sure that you've got some fallback if carrier A lets you down and so on. But also have that flex in their own operations because quite often it's left to the carrier to catch up what might have gone wrong in the pick and pack operation. So that working together is so important.
Yeah, I think so. And what do you think you've sort of enjoyed the most to date in terms of your career, whether it was within TNT or most recently Royal Mail?
I think that I've been really fortunate, Nick. I've worked in operations, I've worked in international, I've worked in freight, same-day sales, marketing. I've been exposed to and been involved in so much. But the core of all of that is the people that are doing the work.
That's your thing, isn't it? People and partnerships and
I think so. And I suppose as I've evolved and matured throughout my career and been exposed to that, that's what you realise is that's what makes the difference. I think, I can only speak for myself, but you start your career almost living paycheck to paycheck and just getting through your job, and then you want to get on the ladder or whatever you want to do. But pretty quickly into leadership, you realise you can't do anything on your own, And I think those years, because I was a relatively big management responsibilities quite early in my career, 19, 20, I had to work quite hard with the people because people are looking at me going, what do you know, mate? Are you sure you're telling me what to do? And so I had to develop techniques to work through that. And pretty quickly, it probably started in an operational, slightly aggressive approach, and they mellow and they develop into hopefully coaching and mentoring and working with people to get the best out of them.
Because that trust takes time, doesn't it? So if they see you coming in 1920 and they're lifers, they're like, John who? What?
Of course, yeah, of course. And I always remember, particularly at TNT, and it was primarily 7.5 tonne lorry deliveries. And of course, I'm of the age where I didn't get a 7.5 tonne licence automatically. So very naturally, you've got the drivers going, do you even know what this is? Yes.
You've got a licence.
Have you got a licence? So you have to understand that as a leader, as a manager, you don't know everything.
No.
And you can't experience every single role. And therefore, the leadership or the management in itself is the skill, not necessarily the commodity or the team or the department that you're looking after.
So you very quickly had to learn how to delegate and, really pull on the team that you had around you. So if you were putting the strategy in place, but you knew you had the best people around you to implement that.
Yeah, and of course, earlier in your career or when you're in middle management, you're typically not responsible for strategy per se. You're a deployment engine. And I think that messy middle, as I call it, is really, really difficult because you're taking somebody else's strategy that you may or may not agree with and trying to make it work every single day with a group of people that also may or may not agree with it. And you haven't necessarily got all of the...
Everyone's maybe not on the same page.
Everyone's maybe not on the same page, but you've got the pressure from above and the pressure from below because you're dealing with the real life part, the coalface. So that's a really interesting... I think that's probably the most undervalued...
That mid-tier.
Yeah, that mid-tier. And I think if you can get really good mid-tier managers in your function, your department and so on, then you're onto a winner.
Well, what led you, that's just reminded me actually, talking about people and relationships, what led you to do this apprenticeship programme within Royal Mail? Because that was something you were passionate about, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And as ever, you stand on the shoulders of giants. So Graham Davis, who I mentioned before me, had started this apprenticeship work within the sales organisation. But the requirement was quite simple. One of the brilliant things about Royal Mail is people are there for a long time, so you've got loads of experience. Lifers, yeah. One of the challenges of Royal Mail is people have been there for a long time. So they were ageing like all of us. So what needed to happen is we needed to bring younger salespeople in through a route that would allow them to be trained fully, but trained in sales as well as the company. So it goes way beyond the company induction. Who ultimately, as people roll off their careers, that there's a new generation coming through.
Yeah, and they can pass that knowledge. They've got 20, 30 years of the knowledge to pass down to that next generation of talent, haven't they? Which
Absolutely.
Once they retire, that's gone, wasted.
Yeah, of course. And to let it, you lose knowledge out of organisations all the time through people leaving. But it is a crying shame because that real mix of absolute raw passion and enthusiasm and wanting to get going and having a finger on the pulse of culturally what's happening in younger generations and that years of experience, tacit knowledge.
Hands-on raw experience.
Absolutely. So if you can find a way to try and combine that as best you can. But that apprenticeship programme continued to grow.
Okay.
And so we did it through the sales organisation, but we also used the apprenticeship levy, like I think all organisations should if they're not doing it
So were
already.
they graduates then, or were you just happy to take anyone with the right sort of attitude and willingness to learn?
So that evolved as well. So the first cohort weren't graduates, so they'd finished sixth form or college, so they'd done a A-level or equivalent. And this was an opportunity rather than going to university for them.
Okay, interesting.
And you've got to argue, why wouldn't you? So you're earning a salary, you're not incurring any debt, and you're gaining a degree level qualification at the end of it. And
with a market leading brand.
With a market leading brand, and you've got a job to go for. So if university's not your path, and it's not for many, myself included,
or me,
then it's a great thing to do.
Yeah.
But as we moved later into it, one of the things that I'm really passionate about, in part because we were talking just before, I didn't do GCSEs.
No.
I had to do my functional skills alongside my master's degree because I had to have it to qualify for the master's.
That's unbelievable, really, if you take a minute to see where you got to. You came out of school, no GCSEs, you came into TNT, you progressed into Royal Mail, managing upwards of 5 billion P&L and a team of indirectly 2,000 people. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, thank you. And it is, but it's the opportunities that I've had.
So you seize those opportunities.
So you seize those opportunities, and starting my career in a company like TNT, which at that time was in its heyday almost.
Yeah. It's a very good grounding, that, for you, actually, wasn't it? It
was a really good grounding. And I think that, like Chris Farron, who was on, he mentioned the similar with UPS.
I wish you hadn't mentioned him. I told him I was going to specifically tell you not to mention him.
But I think, I know, but I thought I should. But I think what it speaks to, and it's the sort of advice that I gave my kids, which is actually if the traditional educational route is not for you, it wasn't for me. I couldn't stand that classroom environment.
It doesn't work for everyone. Some people are better practically, hands-on, learning on the job. Absolutely. Everyone's different.
They are. And what I wanted to be able to provide, having been fortunate enough to find myself in a position where I could make some decisions over those things, is those types of opportunities in a company like Royal Mail, and hopefully InPost in the future, or whatever company I end up working for, because I think for large companies, any company, but particularly large companies that can expose young people straight out of GCSEs into that work environment, who might have otherwise been cast off because they haven't got the bits of paper, I think organisations are missing a massive trick. Now, you have to accept that not everyone that comes through that programme is going to be a grade A superstar student of that. You will have, and we experienced a higher turnover of people either leaving the course early or once they've got their qualifications going elsewhere because they've got this great opportunity.
But a few of them probably didn't really understand what they were signing up for. So once they're in it and they're living it and breathing it, they either love it or they think it's not quite for me. So you've got to put them through that process so they understand what they're going to be dealing with, don't you?
You do. But I think what's really important for the organisations, because we've already spoke about margin pressure. There's particularly in sales, there's always a requirement to deliver. You're only as good as your last quarter or your year, whatever it might be. Targets will continually go up. When your resource budgets are squeezed, it's very tempting to say, well, I've got a sales vacancy. I'm going to go and recruit a established BDM from a competitor.
Yeah.
There's merit in that. They understand the industry, they might have some contacts, they can, in theory, hit the ground running. Sometimes that'll be successful. You know this, Nikki, you've placed hundreds of them, I'm sure. Sometimes it won't be. The research that I did for my master's, actually, was that if you are able to give those people who are absolutely green to the industry, so no sales knowledge, no industry knowledge, but willing to learn, and put them through an apprenticeship to a degree level, yes, it might take them 2 to 3 years to ramp up to an average performance.
Yeah.
But beyond that, they accelerate at a much quicker rate. Whereas the established BDM will come in, has a much quicker ramp-up time, but then plateaus. Now, of course, I'm generalising for simplicity.
But it makes sense. And you also get the loyalty from those apprentices because you've given them a shot and a chance. And I was talking to, I can't remember who it was. It was one of my other podcast guests. And it seems to be BDMs. They're only very small. Obviously, I do a lot in sort of cross-border, international cross-border, which, as you know, is a super small niche talent pool. Something has to change. We can't keep moving those 5 or 6 BDMs from 5 or 6 different companies around every 12 to 18 months. No. So a lot of my clients now are saying, we quite like this graduate programme. We quite like an apprenticeship. We quite like to get someone maybe only with 6 months in a service-based business that has an appetite to want to build and grow and scale. So something does need to shift. It needs to level up a little bit, I think.
It does, but as the company, you've got to provide the pastoral care around it.
Of course.
You've got to acknowledge you're not bringing in fully formed...
No.
mature adults in some cases, right? You are bringing in people who this might be their first job. It might be, it's their first experience of not being in school, potentially. And we can all kind of remember what we were like at those ages.
Well, I wasn't really in school. You know how it goes when you're... But that's the thing, and it's that first step. Normally there'd be a waiter or a waitress, or they'd maybe work in a retail shop, just going from the history of what my son's friends have done, just to try and get into the world of work. But to get into an affiliated programme or apprenticeship, it is quite a gear shift for them, really.
I think so. I mean, I'd encourage any of my kids' friends and are similar age to your son who are thinking about what the next steps, I'd encourage them to consider apprenticeships in whatever industry, because I just think it's a brilliant grounding.
So what is the future going to look like with this next opportunity? What are you going to be responsible for? What will the sort of team dynamic look like?
Well, I can't say too much about it, Nikki, unfortunately.
You knew I was going to ask that. I had to push it out there.
The reality is, as you might expect, so I'm on garden leave from Royal Mail. I can't engage with the new employer until that period is over. So I know what we knew at the interview stage, but there's a period of time that's passed between that, not least the acquisition of Yodel and so on as well. But primarily it will be the commercial function. And as InPost continues to grow and establish itself. And
they've just announced some good numbers, actually, and figures. So be interesting to see how they continue to scale. Because I think lots of other companies are now trying to get into that locker space. So it seems to be on the company's agendas per se. But I think next 12, 18 months is going to be interesting for lots of companies in our industry.
I think so. Look, the economics of out-of-home delivery, locker delivery and so on is clearly attractive to carriers who are already margin constrained. And if some of those savings can be passed on to the retailers and the consumers, then that's really attractive. But you're right. All of the major players are looking at alternative ways to
Well, they need to pivot now, don't they? With, like you say, margins being as they are, quite a lot of my sort of parcel e-com distribution clients, they're now moving into fulfilment as well. So they're doing an add-on from that perspective. So maybe one of their warehouses, they're turning into a proper fulfilment centre, having it automated, and just looking at diversifying a little bit because of the past 12 to 18 months being quite tough from a pure parcel perspective. With your multinationals, it's ebbs and flows, but with smaller privately owned, it can have catastrophic effects if they're not keeping moving and doing things a little bit differently. Yeah,
of course. Those adjacencies are really, really important, I think. But that's where getting your strategy right is very, very important, because it's easy, isn't it, to be seduced by the next shiny thing, whatever that might be.
Definitely.
It wasn't that long ago we were all talking about how same-day delivery is going to be the norm.
Yeah, true, actually.
And the reality is, it's not. In part because the economics remains quite a niche, relatively niche compared to the whole size of the sector. But that's what we see in our industry. We see those trends come along. We see the research saying what consumers want and what they really want, and then what they're willing to pay for. And sometimes you've got to make sure that those things come together.
Well, do you see any specific trends? Obviously, you've got 27 plus years experience. Is there anything that you feel carriers might start adopting in the next sort of 12, 18 months?
I think I'm almost loathed to say it because it seems to be the answer to everything. Carriers that are technology first, carriers that are utilising what the capability that AI brings, and I know AI is a very broad church, but what it brings to improve efficiencies in operations, or what it brings to improve efficiencies in commercial areas, or help with forecasting, whatever it might be. I think the carriers that are thinking like that should be ahead of the game. The challenge always with new technologies is as soon as it's landed, it could be out of date. And of course, it can sometimes take a long time to integrate technology. We will see continued increased customer expectations. Yeah. So I would imagine we will see enhancements in tracking capability, tracking exposure, tracking visibility, whatever that might be, real-time changes to deliveries, people moving on the fly, as we broadly seem to be in the office half the week and at home half the week, and our schedules change quite a lot as consumers, then I think that's going to need to become more important. Or we could also see the other side of that, which is carriers locking down a bit, almost, I was going to say dumbing down the service for want of a better word. I don't really mean that. Simplifying the service offering to say this is a really good standard of delivery and it's really cost effective. Yeah. And so you can also have that if that's what your base level is. We might see home delivery, for example, become a premium service. Yeah. It will depend on how we act as consumers.
Interesting. If you've seen how it's evolved in those 25 years, if you think even since COVID, we've had a major shift in this industry, haven't we? Yeah. In, 4 years ago? I lose all track with it now. Is it 4 or 5 years?
Well, I think we all placed bets that the volumes were going to continue. And of course, we saw them return to what would have been normal trend levels. Yeah. So we all saw that huge spike. A number of us made investments into coping for that big spike, and that's probably helped over the peak period because there's increased capacity across the industry, which I think is quite helpful. It does mean dead time for the other 9 months of the other 11 months of the year. Sorry, or dead space. So, but we continue to buy online, right? And that is just too easy to do. And I mentioned it earlier, but that consolidation of a lot of us start our shopping searches on Google or Amazon rather than the retailer or eBay, whichever it might be.
I don't go into shops at all now to buy clothes. That's terrible. Every Saturday, it was a girls' thing where we'd go out, drink, lunch, shop. I can't remember the last time I went into a shop and bought clothing. Everything for me, or even shoes, everything is physically online. And I'm terrible because if it doesn't come the next day, if there isn't an option, I'll choose another retailer, which is so lazy. But I think that's from COVID. We got so used to getting something before 10 o'clock the same day or the next day before 11. Yeah. We've been conditioned into a way of, we need it now.
Yeah, and I think that's that part around some of the value being driven out of that because it's not easy to move something from one end of the country to the other 100% of the time and it be exactly where you want it. And consumers understandably don't appreciate the complexity that goes into that. Yeah. So you see it on social media all the time. How can you lose my parcel? It's a big box. And you think, well...
Got millions going through our network every day.
Absolutely. It's very, very difficult to
But
if
they're not in this industry, they don't understand it, do they? So they just think, where's my parcel? Yeah. How, you terrors. You've lost it.
We're all ignorant to what goes on in industries we're not familiar with, aren't we? Although arguably that's one of the real privileges of doing a commercial sales type role in this industry is you sit in front of thousands of different businesses from the very smallest to the very largest in different industries, and you get a window into UK PLC actually, which I'm not sure is afforded to you in many other industries actually.
Definitely. In terms of the retailers, obviously you've worked in this industry for a long time. What do you think their expectations are going to be changing? Obviously, you said about things evolving. Do you think their expectations are going to be changing from carriers as partners over the next sort of 12, 18 months?
Retailers will always, rightly so, demand more from their suppliers. I think what we saw through COVID, but I think in a lot of industries is... Retail, and I suspect we're seeing it again now with tariffs. So retailers are asking the question of the carriers, well, what's going on with tariffs? Or what's going on with customs? Or what's going on with COVID, for example. So there's almost this real need for very practical knowledge because they need to be able to manage their retail operations and delivery options. And So I think those that have got commercial relationships that both bring genuine support beyond just managing the contract of moving parcels.
Or giving the retailer the heads up that something's happening rather than them having to wait and see what's coming out in the public domain, that sort of a relationship.
And it's a cliche, but it's the insight beyond just
that makes sense.
Because what those retailers need is again, we keep saying it, they'll have had their own resources cut. They might have lost some of those, and quite often it falls to the carrier manager, the operations director, the warehouse manager, whoever that is, to report back into their business about these trends. So if you're able to provide that with meaningful evidence, with meaningful insight, practical applications of what you can do as a partnership, then retailers are going to require that.
Yeah, that's quite a very good value add. I think the retailers would not be so focused on the cost, and they would pay maybe a little bit more of a premium to have that sort of support network, because if they're ahead of the game with things that are coming out in the industry rather than a knee-jerk reaction, like what happened with the US, for argument's sake, and everyone went into a tailspin, be like, right, we're not shipping to the US now. Well, some carriers educated those retailers and said, well, actually, you can, because we've got solutions that do X, Y, Z, but it's the not knowing, isn't it, for them? So it's quite valuable to have that insight.
I think it's paramount, but I think that goes for the big retailers.
Any size.
Actually, all sizes, because the medium and the smalls are trying to compete for market share or build their brands or expand their markets, whatever they might be. So if they can get the benefit of that experience, that large company experience as well, that's huge for them, because they might not be able to generate that level of insight within their own worlds. And so, but there leads the challenge, doesn't it? The medium and small retailers are trying to compete with much lower volumes, so much lower buying power. And I think Luke was talking about it from Valente, wasn't he? That his willingness to pay a bit more for that value add, that service, which is really admirable. But of course, not all retailers
are in that position to do that, possibly. But I think, they seem to be swaying more to that multi-carrier option. Were you seeing that in Royal Mail? Were you seeing that customers were opting for that, and were you focusing on more your tier 2s, tier 1s, or did you still have a mix of small to medium size that were working with you as a no network?
So we one of the things at Royal Mail is we had an absolutely huge trading base. So hundreds of thousands of account customers.
Yes.
So the challenge that I had was that resource allocation. How do you give account managers at the appropriate level to all of those customers?
Very difficult.
It was really difficult, because you can't. You get to the point of diminishing returns. You can't keep employing people. They've all got to add value.
But also trying to sort of ascertain which ones of those are going to become a bigger client or a tier 2, because everybody starts in business and says, we're going to be a 50 million turnover in 5 years. Are you?
Yeah.
And 1 in 20 will, but you've got to, how do you level that playing field really to make sure that those smaller customers feel valued enough to then stay on the journey if they do get to be a tier 2 or a tier 1.
Yeah, and that's where that the commercial policy that you've got is really important. 2 things: the salesperson, actually spotting it and understanding there's real mileage in this, and a commercial policy that somehow supports a pathway to growth. But within that commercial policy, you've got to have some level of consistency.
Exactly,
so you can't afford to upset all of your tier 1 retailers, because of course they're incredibly valuable to you.
And the volume.
They bring the volume, they pay for a lot of your network and so on. But equally, there's more profit per parcel in those lower tiers.
Yeah.
That balance is really, really difficult, I think, for organisations of all sizes.
Of any size, And it's and I think they start with something that they know. So historically, from talking to other retailers, they will go to a DHL, a FedEx, a UPS, a Royal Mail, because that's what they know, or even an Every, if it's sort of domestically or, some international. So it's interesting for me, because the multi-carriers weren't really on my radar other than maybe 3 years ago. They started to become a little bit more prevalent. So it was interesting what Luke was saying, how he transitioned from an own network to that. But I think you quite rightly say that's also the relationship they have with their salesperson, who believes in what they're doing has a handle on the growth plan, the strategy, and thinks actually this could be better suited. So,
and the multi-carriers are, I think Luke's example is a great one, and there's hundreds of thousands of those where you can understand why people have gone for a multi-carrier or through I'll choose my words carefully, through a reseller or an agent of some sort.
Like more reseller consolidator type business.
Absolutely. But all of the carriers that I've worked for, and I think it'll be something for time and memoriam, flip-flop between whether they want to work with resellers or agents.
Thing. Do you think at some point, the sort of reseller consolidators are going to start getting a little bit too ahead of the game, and the multinationals are going to say, actually, no, we're switching this off now. You're getting too much market share.
I suspect so, but what I don't think we'll see is all of the multinationals doing it all at the same time.
No.
Because as we all do and all we'll look at our customer base and we'll see where we're leaving money on the table, and we'll try and forecast the difference between having those customers direct and what it costs to service them versus maintaining a relationship with a multi-carrier platform. Those partnerships are really, really important. So the approach that I took was to create a partnerships team.
Okay, interesting.
Because what you can't have as the carrier is to be selling against yourself.
No.
So you need a really clear boundary that says, this is how we're going to work with a multi-carrier platform, a reseller, an agent, a 3PL, whatever it might be. And this is how we're going to work with a direct retailer who comes with us with the same volume. Now, of course, every so often you're going to have to make commercial decisions because traffic's going to move from one to the other for reasons that maybe you can't control or you can't solve. But if carriers don't get that commercial strategy right, they could see an exodus to multi-carrier platforms. That may or may not be a problem, but ultimately, as a carrier, you're attacked from another angle as well. So you've got the physical multi-carrier platforms, ones we all know, some way better than others, as we know. But also you've got lots of other people competing to own a relationship with the customer. So whether that's e-commerce platforms or Shopify or eBay or Vinted, so customers, they all want to own the relationship with the customer and control it.
And then they have their own partnership, so they will then say, well, we can introduce you to XYZ.
So there's a natural risk point for carriers to kind of go, how much do we want to own a relationship? How much do we want to subcontract to a middle party of some sort? And therefore, what's the future?
It's a minefield, really, if you think about it.
It's really, really difficult. Yeah, it's really difficult because you need volume.
Yeah.
Right? You need volume, and you need volume at the right the right price. You need to go where the market's growing. So it is a bit of a web of who can provide you and your customers that best service, but you still maintain an edge as to why a customer, even if they go to a multi-carrier, you'd still want them to choose you.
And I know people have gone to another company and then they've gone back to the previous company because they're like, look, it was a little bit cheaper, or they promised us this, but actually the lead times are different. The network's not where they said it was. We can't do this particular lane when they said that we could. So I think a lot of trust has got to come into that relationship piece, because like the fulfillment CEO that I was talking to, he said, your partners have got a lot of control over your business, whether it's the partnerships, whether it's the fulfillment piece, whatever it may be, that's got to work and gel.
I think retailers, and of course the retailers do this, the level of sophistication in my experience varies, but they've really got to analyse that total cost of delivery. Because yes, you could save a penny, 10p, 20p, 30p on the price of a parcel and item.
But what's that really costing?
Yeah, if your delivery quality dips by 2 or 3%, or and you've got increased calls into your customer service, or you're giving more credits back, or your lifetime customer value. You just made the point that you'll continue to shop online for clothes. What that means is the retailers have got to work really hard on your loyalty, and you will probably favour retailers you're familiar with because of fit, size, delivery, all of those things. Well, actually, if you start to lose that, they've got to work really hard to replace you. So a decision they make in their supply chain around delivery could cost you as a customer. The cost of acquisition for them is huge, as we know.
See, it is factoring in that full end-to-end supply chain, though, isn't it? It's not just about, can we get a penny off this or can we get 50p off that? It's like, what is that knock-on effect and that longer-term goal?
Yeah, it is.
What would you say is the best piece of advice you've ever been given, either from a retailer or a customer or in business?
I don't know if it was a single piece of advice, Nikki, or if it's something that just landed in my head. Mm-hmm. And I'll mention them again because Chris Farron mentioned it in his podcast with you. It's finding coaches and mentors that can support you. I've been really fortunate to have sponsors in my career. So people like Nick Landon, people like Graham Davis, great managers, leaders at TNT and so on. I've been really, really lucky to have that. Mm-hmm. But that was a bit organic. My career really started to accelerate when I worked with somewhat independent mentors or coaches who pushed me in a different way. And yes, it was my managers or bosses at the time who said, you need to go and find it. And I was a bit like, really? I'm just going to sit with somebody, and I didn't really understand the difference between coaching and mentoring.
Well, I said that to Chris. Is it quite easy for someone to do this? And he said, well, yeah, you asked the question. People that have been through this process want to give back. What is an hour or two of their time a month to help get someone to that next level? And they enjoy it. Like you enjoy it, don't you?
I absolutely love it. It's one of the things that gives me the most value back, kind of outside of the day job, if you like, is when I'm coaching and mentoring people. You do want to give back, but you get a lot out of it as well because you learn, actually. You learn what somebody's going through. And there is a difference between coaching and mentoring, and I think that's
So
important.
What, in your opinion, is the difference?
So mentoring would be where you might be going to somebody to help you open doors, maybe. So it might be somebody within the same company or specifically the same industry, and they're using their network a little bit and giving you a bit more of the answers.
Oh, so they want advice on a specific topic or subject or help to a problem?
Well, if I answer the coaching bit, and that might help articulate the difference a bit better. Coaching, pure coaching, is where the coach is forcing you to draw upon your own resources to solve the problem.
Okay.
And so you could be I could coach you on recruitment, knowing nothing about recruitment, because you know how to be a good coach. So it forces you.
So you would challenge me and be very much, well, why would you do that, Nikki? So what? What if that happens? What if this happens? This is like what Chris was saying in his. You're very good at pushing for well, why would you? If you do that, so what? What difference is it going to make?
Yeah, what are you really working towards?
Yes.
What does a good outcome look like? What are some of the barriers that you do? And because the person you're coaching knows their life better. They're living the experience. They've got the answers, but we all get a bit blocked sometimes. We get in our own way an awful lot, and we get a bit too emotional when we're close to a situation, and all of the things that make us human. So working with a good coach, whether that's on career development or whether it's on a specific problem, I'm not getting on with my boss, for example, working with a good coach can really help you through that. Whereas mentoring is a bit more supportive in the way that it might help you go through. You might be working with a young person who's taken the next steps in their career specifically, or just got a promotion, and you might be helping them with that.
Ooh, I'd love you to coach me. Now you're saying that, I'd be like, right, John, you said I can have 2 hours a month. But you want to be around good people. And the fact that, like you say, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, if somebody can just test your mindfulness and how you're looking at things and why you're looking at things in a certain way, and it just gets you out of your own head a little bit, doesn't it?
It helps expose what's possible.
Yes.
So back to the question, is it easy to get? Well, it's really difficult to get a coach or mentor if you haven't got the confidence or you're afraid to pick up the phone and ask somebody. That's where a mentor or a good manager might help and say, well, go and speak to Nikki. Pick up the phone, I'll make an introduction to you. But if you haven't got somebody to do that, then it takes probably some gumption to pick up the phone or make contact or reach out to somebody. And some people might say no, but that's the reality. But there's lots of people.
You never know what they've got going on in their own lives, do you? It's...
It might be a not for now.
Exactly. Maybe not now, but possibly in the future.
But it is so valuable in my experience. And I mean, you asked about advice. My advice back to anybody would be, if you are taking your career seriously and you're either at a turning point or you want to move on or you're not sure what to do, seek out a good coach or mentor. Your company might support you. We built a coaching program at Royal Mail, specific performance coaches.
Oh, really? Was that for people internally, or were you having people?
That was for salespeople specifically.
Ah, right, okay.
Because back to that messy middle, I was expecting managers to manage
their salespeople.
The salespeople as well as coach them. And yes, a good manager can do both, but not all of the time. No. The demands were just too high. So I wanted to create an environment where, I'm not a fan of sports analogies typically, but same as a football player will work with a coach.
Yes.
It's not their boss, it's not their manager, it's a coach who's helping them get better. I wanted to create an environment where salespeople could have access to that.
And do you think they flourished with that? Did you see results?
Yeah, the results were really, really good.
Right, good.
But also some people just like, no, I don't. I've been doing it for 20 years. What do I need a coach for?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and you understand that as well.
Yeah. Well, it's like John, who came on, the head of business development. He said, you know your audience. Everyone's different. Everybody, you might have a team of 5 or 10, but those 5 or 10 all have different aspirations, different ways they need to be managed, different, ways you've got to speak to them. So the fact you had 400 UK salespeople, it's tricky.
Yeah. It is tricky. It is tricky, but that's the gig, isn't it? To provide an environment for growth as best you can.
Yeah, definitely. Who would you say have been your biggest mentors or influencers growing up?
Well, as I said, I've been really fortunate to have some great sponsors. So, my very early managers, I could probably name some of the really key ones, but like Simon Marriott, Sean Buckley. Really, my first days at TNT just showed me a world that I didn't really understand. Simon Harper, who's now at DX, was a great general manager for me. The experience at Citylink was huge, but then of course Graham Davis and Nick Landon for me were huge sponsors of my career and time at Royal Mail, who I owe an awful lot to, both for pushing me harder than probably I would have liked at times, but also
but for your own good,
isn't
it? Yeah. When you think where it's got you.
Yeah, of course.
They must have believed in you and felt that you had the capabilities to do it, or they wouldn't have kept pushing you on.
You can only hope so. And that's that difference, again, between a sponsor, somebody who just for whatever reason sees something in you that maybe you don't see.
Yes.
And a coach or a mentor. My wife, Mandy, who, as I said, we worked together. She was really my introductory into the sales and commercial world, but also just makes me a lot better person than I used to be. So I think without her constant influence and guidance, I wouldn't have been able to build the career that I've had.
Yeah. So did she sort of take a back seat from her career then to focus on the family while you developed?
No. So
path?
she came out of corporate because it was time for her to and starts her own business, and she's much happier. But no, it was more about the fact that having those shared experiences and having somebody that can support you and having almost like that coach or mentor at home.
I suppose she understood. She's from the industry, isn't she? So
yeah, and you can understand why that wouldn't work for some relationships, but for us it really did, and selfishly for me it absolutely did. So having that kind of live-in support was very welcome.
Good. Well, obviously Mandy and the children and your grandchild are part. Oh, you didn't want me to mention that, did you?
No, it's fine.
Well, you look good on it, John. And they're obviously part of your why. Is there anything else that keeps you sort of motivated and productive on a day-to-day basis outside of the family and relationships?
I think I didn't come from a huge amount, right? So I'm scared of not having anything. And I think my biggest motivator, which I've come to learn, is I just sort of want some choice and freedom over my life. So I want the choice to continue to work or not. What I've worked out about myself is if I feel like I've really got to do something, like you're doing it under duress or you're stuck in a job or a relationship, whatever it might be, then I don't perform at my best.
No.
So I need to feel that I've got some level of control over my own destiny. So I think as long as I'm always working towards that, what does that look like for me? So that's a big motivator. But ultimately, I just want to enjoy myself.
Well, we're at work so much of our life, aren't we? It's tough, and we've all got targets and milestones and things that we need to hit, but you've got to have a bit of fun along the way, haven't you? You've
got to have some fun. You've got to get fulfillment out of it. And this period of time that I've had off work has been very, very welcome. It's a huge privilege. I can't say it's not.
A mind shift. If you've gone through the motions every day in that sort of an environment with challenges that we've all seen in the industry over the past few years, I mean, were you automatically just waking up as normal and thinking, because you must have been on the phone 24/7.
You were, and so the not being on your phone or having to check it constantly and those habits. And yes, still wake up early.
And
I'm
checking
not always
your
early, but
emails.
Yeah, checking my emails. There's nothing there. I'm like, can someone send me some spam mail or something? So I've got something to do. But it's been a really good reflection on kind of what's important to me. And I realise I'm really fortunate I'm going to a role. What I've also realised is that level of structure, purpose, meaning, something to contribute to is really, really important. We all get times in our jobs where we go, I just don't want to do it anymore. I just want to give it up. But I love work. So I don't, that's not the case. And I think I will have challenging days and periods of time, as we all will in our career in the future. And so remembering that actually I'm choosing to do this because I quite like it most of the time. It's quite good.
That's the thing. And somebody said to me, you've got to follow your bliss. If it feels like hard work and you're slogging, you're not in the right job, you're not with the right company, you're obviously going to have days where you think, oh, damn, I can't do this again. But if 90% of the time it's flowing, you're in the right spot.
Yeah. I'd caveat that, though, also with you've got to be challenged, I think.
And committed,
And committed. But I think you need to be, as best you can, operating on the edge of your capability and beyond it to continue to grow.
You can say the edge of your nerves then. The past few years, you've got to be on the edge of your nerves.
That too, yeah.
Is there anything that you feel you want to talk to me about? Obviously, I'm conscious you're an industry expert. A lot of the audience are going to know who you are, where you've come from, what you've done already. Is there anything that you feel you've spotted in the industry or you've experienced that you feel could help the audience, whether it's in terms of career development, if they want to get to a certain point in their career, or whether it's in terms of the industry as a whole?
So I think, at the risk of repeating myself, if you're interested in your career development, find somebody to work with you on that. Pay attention to it. And I won't dwell on that anymore. The environment that I would always want to create as a leader is one to a degree of self-help. So I think everybody should take accountability. One of my hobby horses is personal accountability.
Yes.
And I haven't always taken personal accountability for my career. I was certainly at points earlier in my career where I thought, well, why is this not happening for me? Why am I just not automatically being promoted? This is, why are people not seeing what I'm doing? And the answer is because I wasn't doing anything to make that happen, or not enough, certainly. And I see that a lot, having been fortunate enough to work with big teams of people, work very closely with individuals and, gone through that. You can spot the patterns where people are getting in their own way. And sometimes they'll be blamed because they don't get on with their boss.
Yes.
For example, I've had leaders that I've not particularly got on with, and then that has been a reason that I've held myself back. Well, actually, you can't operate like that. You've got to take some accountability to work around the solution or work out what you're doing that's contributing to those challenges. And there will be something. So my advice, for what it's worth, to everybody wherever they are in their career is really focus on your part in that journey. Your life, your career is nobody else's; it is yours.
Yes.
And you've got to really examine that.
Yeah, that's interesting, and especially when you say about that mid-tier, because they're the level where they're thinking, do we stay here? Are we getting complacent? Are we ready to step up? But then sometimes they make decisions because they don't like the boss. We just want to get out of the situation that we're in, but they're not actually ready to get to that next level. And that can sometimes have quite detrimental effects. I've seen it, this year in particular, where 2 or 3 people have come out of that. They've gone into sales director or commercial director roles, and it's not gone their way because they've got blindsided by a really big salary and the title and everything else, and they don't have the level of experience needed. And when someone's paying you a lot of money, there is a big expectation on you to deliver, you know.
There is, and it's easy to. You asked earlier who I was motivated by. I was always motivated by people that seemed to be doing well.
Yes.
I never idolised pop stars or football players or anything. It was just people who generally seemed to be doing well, and I was always interested in that.
Was that the kudos that they had? Was it the monetary side of things? What did you?
All of those things.
Of it, yeah,
all of those things, and partly because I didn't have it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like an aspirational view, and I think that's something we don't celebrate, particularly in UK culture, unfortunately. But I think the point of that is that if you're not looking forward, if you're letting somebody else or not understanding why somebody's in the position that they're in, or finding yourself a bit jealous or envious of it, then that's probably the wrong emotion. Maybe why try and find out.
You should be, pumped for people doing well. I love it.
Absolutely.
And it makes me want to work harder because I'm like, oh, if she can do that or he can do that, I can do that. It's inspiring to me, but not everyone, like you say, is of that same mindset, are they?
No, and I think if you can find that in yourself, understand why everybody's got a story, right? Go and ask what it is, and you'll probably end up motivated rather than bitter.
Yeah, I think that's a good shout, actually. Well, we're approaching the end of our podcast, Jon, and as you know, we have like a quick fire round. Yep. Are you happy for me to ask you some
go for it.
Quick fire questions? It's not for me. The audience like to know a bit about the guests. So what would you say... Right, let me have a look at this, actually. Make sure I'm not asking you anything too wacky. Okay, morning person or night owl?
Well, both, but probably morning person.
Both morning. We can't, world of logistics never sleeps,
exactly.
does it?
Yeah.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs, definitely.
Favourite holiday destination?
Spain.
Oh, whereabouts in Spain?
We have a place in Murcia. So,
nice.
Down near there, yeah.
Okay, perfect. What is a food you could eat every day? Type of food?
Probably chicken every day. Probably chicken. Yeah, in its various forms.
Thought you protein.
Yeah, probably chicken every day. Yeah.
Chicken. Okay. Is there a certain sort of book or podcast that's inspired you, or a film?
Probably not a film. Mm-hmm. I think that there's a few books that I've referred to and built on, I suppose, over my career. The Oz Principle, which is about personal accountability. Okay. Good to Great, which I think gives a really good framework.
Quite a few CEOs mention Good to Great.
I think it's very practical. It's one of those that I think is quite transferable, despite the fact it was written a little while ago. I think you can apply it, particularly in new leadership situations. The first 90 days, I think, is similar to that. Podcasts, other than this one, of course, Nikki, which is the most inspirational, educational one.
I'll take it.
I think not that they've don't listen to them now. I think the earlier days of the High Performance Podcast and Diary of a CEO, for me, when I used to have dogs and walk them every morning, I'd listen to them a lot. And when I was commuting a lot more, listen to them a lot. Yeah. And I just learnt so much. Just generally, it just broadened my knowledge. You spent
so long in the car, if you think about it.
Yeah, in a car, on a train, whatever it might be. And I think those two particularly, just that breadth of guests, and I've learnt an awful lot from those. I listen to a much broader range now, but I think they were really influential for me probably 5-6 years ago. Yeah,
perfect. Is there a guilty pleasure you're willing to admit on air?
Probably not on air, Nikki, no. I don't know. No, probably nothing too...
nothing too crazy?
Nothing too crazy, I don't think. No.
Okay. Is there anything else that you feel you would like to sort of discuss before we wrap it up? Any sort of final thoughts from yourself?
No, well, obviously, to thank you for having us along.
Thank you for coming.
I really appreciate it. I think the only thing I would say is we've spoken a lot about people in the industry. I think this industry continues to be fascinating. I think it's going to continue to evolve. The fact that somehow I managed to start in a career getting on for 30 years ago, which is really relevant today, feels a huge privilege.
You fell into really.
I fell into it, and I would just encourage, if there's any younger people considering their careers, I would encourage young people to look at logistics as an opportunity, because it's so broad, it can teach you so much. And I'd encourage anybody to look at a career in sales, because it's just a fabulous way to spend your time, isn't it? Talking to people. I mean,
I love it, but I don't feel like it's business, and you probably don't, because you're a people person. So yes, you have challenges and obstacles and things you need to get through, but the core thing is the relationships with your customers or your employees, isn't it, at the end of the day, and how you can engage with them and get the right results.
Yeah, and in this gig, if you can get, well, it's arguably in any industry, I suppose, if you can get operational knowledge and commercial knowledge, then you're in a really good spot to build from.
Do you think that really helped you then as you were obviously you were operations and then product development, and do you think when you were engaging with sales, having that operational insight was valuable to you in that role?
Yes, without a shadow of a doubt. No, of course it waned, the further away from the operation I kind of got in my career, and you have to be quite disciplined to try and get back to it and understand it. But without a shadow of a doubt, just having that knowledge.
There's not lots of sales managers or heads of sales that have come through that route. They'll come through maybe telesales or account management and then a sales manager. So it's interesting you see, that has been quite a good shift.
I was very lucky, but you've also got to be careful of not dining out on experiences from 20 odd years ago, Nikki. So,
I was going to say, John, it was in like 1980.
Exactly, yeah, precisely. So you've got to be mindful that the world has changed quite a bit since then.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed having you on.